Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Founders Chair podcast. Andy Goldberg here. Very pleased to welcome onto the program today Mike Sturton from the company B Resourcing. Mike, welcome to the Founders Chair.
Hi, Andy. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to
Uh,
be here.
Thanks very much for doing this. Really excited to hear about your story. Can you just tell us the personal story first? Just tell us a little bit about you personally before we get into the business side of things. Where you from, where you live, what you like to get up to when you're not at work, and so forth.
Yeah, sure. I'm from Edinburgh, born and bred. I was one of these kids who was very keen to not see the world as such. I wanted to study kind of close to where I was brought up, mainly because I had a good network of friends and stuff like that. And I studied biology. I was good at biology at school, and Dolly the sheep was on our doorstep. So Edinburgh Uni just happened to be, one of the best global um, universities for biology. So got onto the course there, got a little flat in town, had some great years, brilliant years, in fact. Was in a band, did all that. Um, University, though, I was working at the same time. So I suppose one part of my story is that I started off working when I was 11 years old. So I've had a wage coming in since I was 11. I lied about my age to get a paper round 2 years earlier than I was supposed to. That was interesting when I was when we were celebrating my 13th birthday, and I'd been working for the shop for 2 years, so that raised a few eyebrows. From there, a sports centre opened up in the sort of satellite town I'm from, Linlithgow, and I badgered the lady who ran the cafe to get a job there when I was 15. They had it was £2 an hour at the time because we were, cheap child labour. And I remember being at school and having a paycheck of £100 a week because I was managing to put in 50-hour weeks around my school. So and then I got a job at Tesco, the local sort of supermarket, and I carried that on through uni. And I started to find that although university was quite interesting, I was probably getting more from my working life, if that makes sense. The kind of relationships I was making. I've always been kind of, and this is the advice I give to a lot of my sort of kids and younger people who work for me, is that it doesn't really matter what's in front of you when you're that age, as long as you do it to the best of your ability. It'll work out. It generally does. So I did that at Tesco, and I was sort of a student, but in charge of the whole store at night and working night shifts because there was the most money in that. I was very kind of driven by having money to get myself through uni. I was really keen to not come out of university in debt or with owing my parents any money. I wanted to do it myself. Um, Quickly though, at Edinburgh Uni, realised that in order to make money, I was always brought up by my parents being, you know, work is you work for a reason. You work to live, you don't live to work, and that was always just my upbringing. So a job, rightly or wrongly, and now I'm older, I sort of look back and think, well, maybe I could have had a bit more choice in terms of enjoying my career path. But with them, it was always there was some early things that shaped me in my upbringing. My dad lost his job. It was like a job for life, and he lost his job when he was about 10, 11, when I was about 10 or 11, and we had to move to a different part of the country down south. That was a big uproar. And I think it was always in the back of my mind that I wanted to have security. So I quickly realized kind of halfway through science that if you want to make a lot of money in science, you've really got to, put in the 10, 20 years of groundwork before you actually get to the point where you're getting your payoff. And that wasn't good. That wasn't good enough for me. So I wasn't wanting to live like a student into my mid 30s like everyone around me was. So I then left uni, got my degree. Um, and at that point, the pressure of having to move back to my parents was heavy. And I, under no circumstances, wanted to do that. I was enjoying my independence. I was 21, just out uni. So I applied for every job that was in the newspaper. So back then it was like every job in the newspaper. and I had no real direction other than I wanted to earn money. And back at that time in Edinburgh, sort of financial services was taking off. It was becoming a real kind of hub. Um, Obviously, we had, you know, just to put into context, that was when Fred the Shred, Fred Goodwin was making his name, and the guy who almost broke RBS back in the day, and was sort of vilified when the whole financial crash came.
Right.
So there was loads of recruitment companies kind of recruiting, and I didn't even really know what a recruitment company was at that time. Um, my mum was an accountant and kind of used an agency, and I just assumed that there was a place that accountants went for jobs. I didn't even realize they did all these different sectors. So I went along to an open day, an assessment day, and there was all these really sharp suited kind of finance graduates and guys who had actually really thought about what they were wanting to do. And I turned up. I remember misjudging it and having to put my tracksuit jacket over my arm and pretend it was a suit jacket because I completely misjudged the whole shirt and tie aspect. But I went in; it was an assessment day, performed well, and fortunately, the manager at the time was looking for a bit of personality over, you know, business acumen at the time. And that was my first job in recruitment, and I enjoyed it. It was very very stressful. Um, what I don't like about recruitment is someone once said to me, it's a sales job. It's the only sales job in the world where the commodity can decide it doesn't want to be sold. People. It's not like
Thought of that before, but yeah.
yeah, it's not like a car on a forecourt can just decide, actually I don't want to be sold anymore. So in a way that's always the challenging part of recruitment. But I enjoyed it, enjoyed the people element of it. I really enjoyed um the part that the more I put in, the more I got out. So because you're on any sort of sales job where you're commission based, I realized that actually there's a really good opportunity here to make a lot of money. Um, the company I went with, they're a big national company. You can see them on my LinkedIn. They had a massive turnover of staff because people would go there and train and then go to a nicer kind of boutique side of things. So um, that huge turnover of staff worked to my advantage because I was in there 6 months, and the next thing I knew, I was running accounts at JP Morgan, Bank of New York, big, global financial places, and I was the guy in Scotland, for those big accounts. And when I say big accounts, it was actually I used to do temporary workers and contractors, so I had to have an on-site presence in each of these companies. It was brilliant. So completely chucked in the deep end, um, and just kicked like mad and kind of got somewhere. Um, that then at that time that led to a kind of, it's funny when you look back now when you're a bit older, some of the career moves you make, you're like, why did I even, like, that was crazy, the move. But I kind of walked away from all this because another company um, offered me a job, and I didn't do my due diligence on it at all. And when I went in there was another guy doing the job that they'd offered me. So I was like, this is a bit strange. And then we sort of had to share everything, split everything. And I then subsequently found out that was the company's kind of hiring strategy. It's like, let's hire 2 or 3 people for the same job and see who, if one survives, the other one won't get through. So that was pretty challenging. But dealt with it, got the head down. Probably didn't really like myself in my 20s, in sales. Look back now and think, God, you know, it was just one of these kind of a real boiler house of a sales job, stack them high, sell them cheap, get your elbows out in your 20s. But I almost killed myself doing it. I was so thin. I was stressed to the max. At that point started to have a young family towards the end of my 20s, and I was just, you know, I wouldn't even say I was playing hard. It wasn't even work hard, play hard. It was just work hard, do long hours. Yeah,
No, you without, getting too cliched about it, you're paying your dues, you're learning a lot.
yeah.
What doesn't kill you only makes you stronger kind of
I,
stuff.
I had a massive fear of just not being able to pay for the roof over my head. You know, I had this massive fear of it wasn't a drive, if you like, you know, like some people have. It was a fear that drove me. It was a fear of not delivering. It was a fear of, you know, just not being a provider, of letting my parents down, all that stuff.
Yeah, it's
And then,
it's avoid pain
yeah,
rather than
yeah,
gain kind of thing.
yeah. And it was a complete, you know, you were completely doubting you know, the whole imposter syndrome, the self-doubt. I mean, I was going out to big investment management houses and speaking to fund managers and having to pretend I knew what they were talking about. I mean, if AI had been around then, it would have been fine. But back then, you know, your manager would give you this big thick book called Investopedia, and you had to learn all the, you know, terms of a financial services house and pretend you knew what you were talking about. And I honestly made probably every mistake that I could have made. But one of the things that I was quite good at was kind of being able to learn, but also to talk, not talk my way out of, that's a bit strong phrase, but I was always able to kind of justify why I'd done something, justified why I'd introduced a certain candidate to them. And you do eventually get there. But then I was probably 9 years with that company, and I had a lot of success and made a lot of money. And then I just hit a wall, and I had a goal in my head, to kind of a financial goal. I had a tiny little family house, and my financial goal was to pay off my mortgage, you know, by the time I was 30. And I did that, and I had no plan for afterwards. And I just kind of crumbled, you know, and I really I had a young family. I didn't know any way to work other than um, putting my foot down to the pedal. So, and then somebody said to me, it was actually another coach back in the day, the first ever coach I'd spoke to, and they said to me, one of the reasons you're not successful because of how you're working, you're successful in spite of how you're working. And I was like, right, okay. And he was like, just I'd started to get a kind of team around me at this point as well. Um, and I made all the mistakes that early managers do, of trying to, you know, do everything for your team, spoon feed them, you know, micromanage them. And I was just, I kept getting promoted and saying, I don't want any management experience. It's just making me busier. You know, just keep me where I am so I can earn money. So then that all came to a head, financially got to where I needed to be, and then left. And I was about 31, 32. And I thought, I'll set up on my own. I'm doing so well. I'm going to become my own business, and I'm going to, you know, I'll take all these clients with me, and I'll be really successful. And I'm at a financial position where I can do that now. Then, fortunately, a couple of the managers I worked with in my very first job had when I said they had a high turnover, a couple of them had went away and sort of worked with another kind of headhunter agency, but then they had set up themselves and they were doing okay. And then they said to me, "Look, what are you going to do?" She just, you know, unbeknownst to me, they took me out for lunch, just as friends, you know. And then they said, "What are you off to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm thinking about setting up on my own." And they were like, "Well, we don't do what you do, you know, so why don't you come and, you know, do it for us? And then you've got the security of, you know, base salary coming in, and you can, you know, why is it you want to?" They said to me, "Why do you want to set up on your own?" I was like, "I just want the autonomy to do it." You know, autonomy was the main thing, because I kind of had a idea of how it should be done then. Recruitment's one of these things where the industry changed quite a lot, in that, you know, forever recruitment businesses wanted to be seen as not salespeople. You know, they wanted to be part of the supply chain in the same way that, you know, accountants are, your legal firms are, your recruiters are. But because their model is, you know, to the outside looking in, it seems like quite a kind of high salesy type model. Well, actually, there was a lot of demand out there for recruiters who weren't doing that model, that were delivery focused, that were, you know, on preferred supply lists, and were there and were judged based on their acumen and their delivery. And I wanted to go down that route.
Yeah.
So I knew that these two ladies that I'd worked before were doing that. The good alignment of kind of brand. So I went and done that, and it just took off massively. I was hugely successful on my own, but I'd sort of made a under their uh, umbrella, but I'd sort of made a promise to myself at that time I was going to do it on my own terms. Put a really fantastic kind of number two that I had in that business. She was somebody who had only been in the industry for a year and was thinking about leaving. And I was why don't you team? This guy needs a bit of help. Why don't you team up with him and see how you get on? So we were in the trenches together. So that creates a real good kind of bond there. And we really built a really good team around us, but through trial and error. We for every good hire, we probably had somebody who didn't work out. That starts to, over time, I was in with that business for about 11 years, and by the time we finished, we were doing really well. I mean, 75% of the whole group's profits were coming from my little team, which was considering we were probably about a quarter of the headcount. We were doing really well. I was offered the usual handcuffs and things to stay, in terms of, but I didn't want to at that point necessarily. Without going into detail, I didn't really want to go into business with the people who were owning it. I didn't want to be kind of tied with them, for reasons that I will keep to myself. But brilliant team, learned so much about delegating. By the end, I was just doing very little. It was just like, it worked like an ant farmer, the Borg. I was a bit of a Star Trek reference there, but it works really well. But I was getting to the point where I felt that the market was changing. I felt that what I was looking for in terms of my own challenge wasn't there anymore. So I kind of, and then I thought, well, now's the time to start to do something myself. So I'd reached another financial point in my life where I was like, that was the thing. I paid off my mortgage when I was young, and then had a family, then immediately had to move to a bigger house and have a mortgage again. So it was like, if I could speak to my younger self, I would have said, just have different goals. But yeah, then, so made a kind of move to do something completely different, as I say. And this time I was ready. 10, 11 years ago, when I had this opportunity to do it myself, in hindsight, I can realize I was nowhere near ready, despite the fact I thought I was. I've also seen a lot of people in my situation sort of kind of shoot their shot a bit too soon, and fail. So I like to do things, and this is the same with people I hire. I like to set them up for success, not failure. And I wanted to do the same for myself. So I was aware of a brand that I called BIT, and they were a kind of competitor of ours, and I'd started to notice they were doing things a bit different. So I suppose, in terms of difference, what I noticed they were doing was, they were almost, the hipster movement happened in recruitment as well. And I noticed that they were being a lot more relaxed, a lot more kind of authentic, a lot more genuine, and a lot less pushy and salesy and talking about how great they are all the time. And it was just real value add out there in the market. And it was just this kind of quiet confidence they had. And I was like, that's what I like that. That's how I felt I related to it. So I kind of reached out to them. Nicola Kelly, actually, who's the CEO, she was the Scottish Business Person of the Year, actually, or Businesswoman of the Year at this time. So her profile was kind of high, and I reached out to her and I said, look, I work with financial services companies, but that's my only market. I put accountants in, I put legal people in, I put marketing people in, I put operations people in, project managers in, but I'm just restricted to this little slither of Scotland. And she was like, well, we're the opposite. She's like, we do all these different sectors, all these different companies, but all we do is put tech people in. And
Mm.
I was like, well, there's a definite alignment there. But I did want to do something myself. So she said to me, well, why don't we have a sister company, that aligns from a value and brand point of view, um, under that umbrella? And that's what we've done. We're about a year in now, and it's been a pretty. We're doing it at probably the worst economic time. You could maybe launch a service business, but it's working really well, so far. Touch wood.
So just give us a summary of where the company's at the moment. What's your main specialty and
Well,
what do you do it for?
yeah. So we're, as I say, we operate across professional and financial services markets. I've got a team behind me now. We're up to a team of 4 and support staff, so it's about 7 in total. Um, we have a decent little client base. So the other thing that we're keen to do is to, and this is something that I would recommend to anyone, is when you're doing anything that's sort of business development focused, is really have a good idea of who you want your target clients to be. If you just go out and try and scattergun it, you'll never get anywhere. We sort of identified that companies that have between about 50 and 1,000 staff are a really good kind of size for us. So that's a lot of the legal firms, some of the kind of boutique financial services firms. They're not so big that they need this massive high street cheap recruitment brand, or that they have their own recruitment teams, but they're not so small that they don't have need for much kind of continual recruitment. So that's where we are. We've got a good little loyal client base, that we're liking. And really, the strange thing is they've came from. This is another thing when you start a job at sales and you move from one client to the other. You go, oh well, it surprises you who comes with you on the journey, and it surprises you who doesn't. So that's been really pleasantly, a good surprise. And obviously we've got the sister companies clients as well that we've been speaking to. So we've had business from, lots of different places that we didn't expect. That old adage though of the more you put in, the more you get out. Still, it's carried with me all the way through recruitment, and so we've worked really hard, and we're lucky because we're getting stuff out of it. The other thing is we've got our brand, our systems are all in place. That was quite an easy job because again we had the infrastructure of the sister company we could fall back on. Financially, I one of the other reasons. So the my first job was money, right? I wanted to get money. My second job was, so the first place I went to was all about money. The second job was still about money, but I wanted to have acumen. I wanted to be with the guys that knew what they were doing.
Mm.
This time, my old team aside, I wanted to work for somebody who, it was the people that led my decision. I wanted to work for a leader or work with a management team that I felt were on the same wavelength as me. And that's what I've got this time. And there was something central. I spoke to 1 or 2 investors and businesses and people that could maybe help me found something. And what I really liked about, the place I'm at just now is, and the people I've teamed up with, was I don't think I'm a optimist or a pessimist. I'm a realist. And when I say to them within year 1, a target would be, it'd be great if we broke even. We're investing all this time, it's getting started. Wouldn't it be a great target if we broke even? And we're hovering around that mark within the first year. And I like that they said that's brilliant, because other people I spoke to wanted big presentations and financial projections and where will you be after month 3? And it was just so, I don't like putting down, as I say, I don't like setting up for failure. I like setting up for success. And I don't want to be tied up and completely hamstrung in, you know, financial targets and incentives that are basically just pulled out of thin air. Because recruitments are, I could sit there and say yes, I'll make X amount of pounds by next month, but it could all fall down and then it doesn't happen. So it's more, rather than short-term goals, I like sort of nice, simple, manageable, achievable, smart objectives, basically. And then it's quite good because if we have that simple, a few simple objectives within our business, then they can waterfall down to the rest of the team quite easily.
So there's already been a lot of learnings and
Yeah.
a lot of hindsight, that you've had along the way, like since you were 11,
Yeah.
and you're looking back now as a wiser, as a wiser man who's, and it's easy, like you said earlier, like why didn't we? Well, it's easier to look at these things in hindsight, and you've got more wisdom and experience behind you. What would you say, if you had to pick one, was your biggest learning over the years as an entrepreneur, as a business owner? What would be the big one?
Slow down to speed up. You don't have to go 100 miles an hour sometimes to get where you need to be, and it takes a massive it, it it takes a massive leap of faith to do that. To leave things till the till the next day because you might, you're in a competitive environment, so that you feel your competitors breathing down your neck. So there is that need sometimes to go 100 miles an hour, but actually that can start impacting the quality of what you're doing, and to put yourself first. There was a day last week where I had a few things happening at once. I had one of those days where it was like I was getting knocked left, right, and center. And then I had a bit of work coming in, and I was like, I'm not in the right frame of mind to do this properly. So, as much as the old me would have just pushed on with that and probably not done a good job, the new me went, you know what, I'm going to take the dog for a walk, clear my head, spend time with the family, and I'll get on this tomorrow and I'll do it better. So, that's the wisdom that comes with a bit older. Um, and also, this is more something I used to sort of. I love coaching and mentoring people. I love bringing team members through, and I know this sounds. My younger person would never have said that because I used to get jealous of everyone around me doing well. But I really like seeing people who have invested in me as a leader. I love seeing them get to where they need to go.
Mhm.
And the main advice I give them is like, just work hard in your 20s. Just work hard. It doesn't matter what's put in front of you. Your leaders, if you've got good leaders, they will see that effort, and they will give you more responsibility and more. The best thing you can do to a leader is not, doesn't matter if you're good on spreadsheets, it doesn't matter if you're good at finance, it doesn't matter. All it matters is that you show the right attitude, and then you will be able to have a good career, and you will go in the right,
Yeah.
providing that you've got good leaders above you.
Show
Um,
the right behaviors.
the right behavior. So we are, funnily enough, this is more where the business is going, but we are starting to get quite a bit of business because of AI. So AI is yet to be able to find behaviors in the same way. So a lot of clients are coming to us saying, we've used all these tools, we've used all these great skills mapping tools, we've done tests and things, and everyone looks brilliant, but we're not getting people who are demonstrating the behaviors at interview. So actually, the human part of recruitment is starting to become, people who like me have a network, or are good at kind of assessing people on their behaviors, or when you're interviewing them, going, yeah, they're giving me a lot of good positivity. That's starting to become the real commodity that I'm selling now. So it's not, anyone can find you five good project managers. Any AI thing can do that, but actually, not many people can find you five project managers that are going to fit in with your business's culture. You know, that somebody said to me, until AI can figure out who's who's maybe um, trying to think of a nice professional way of saying this, but until it can find out who's weird, who's a weirdo, uh,
Yeah.
then recruiters will always be fine. So that's the main. Sorry, go back. I went off on a tangent there, but the main advice, yeah, is definitely about just slowing down a wee bit.
So that's really, really, really good advice. Do focus on a few things, do them well,
Yeah.
go deep. Don't try and get everything done mediocre. Or
If you feel that your output's being affected then just
Yeah.
step away and do it better. You might lose the odd race, but you'll win. But you'll win the overall competition.
But just the world and social media and our environment's putting so much pressure on us, or perceived pressure, I should say, to
Yeah.
get so much done, to go fast.
So
Um,
this is the thing. This is the thing, and we're really worried about AI in this regard as a society because I was at a we hosted a kind of conference last month and we had loads of good kind of top tech leaders speaking about AI. And when I'm kind of go back to 2020, 2002 when literally computers were just starting to, I mean, they were always in, but they really started to take off and impact business like email. I'm of the age of the guys that have really long email addresses because they go, oh, this will never take off, you know. And now you're having to, every time you go to a checkout and you're having to give your email addresses. So I really have to change that.
I know.
But
Yeah,
but 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 what tech did is instead of making our lives easier, it actually increased our productivity. So it was like, here's a computer. You're now you can do 10 times the amount of work that you're supposed to do, rather than giving us this great life balance it was supposed to do. And there's a worry that AI could be the same. Are we going to use it to free up time and to do things and to have more leisure time? Or are we going to do it to crack the whip even harder at humans and get even more output? And I suppose I hope it's different. I hope we've learned the lessons. In a strange way, COVID was really good for me slowing down. It really was a good reset. And a lot of people you speak to will say that because COVID was everyone working remote, everyone having that kind of hybrid working, and I think it's been good for a lot of people. Obviously, other people struggled, but for a lot of people I speak to, it forced a lot of people to slow down.
sure. It's like having a blackout. Like the lights are
Yeah,
out. Well, what do? You sit around and talk, sit around and think.
brilliant.
Do the things that we used to do in the old days before
Yeah,
electricity. Mike, just as we're starting to come up to the end of the end of our time together, but I mean, I could sit and listen to your story all day because I'm sure you I'm sure there's a lot more anecdotes that you could share.
yeah. There's several.
But yeah, but
All
just
the things that went wrong, I think as well. I've focused on all the positive stuff, but there's been plenty of learning
that's
opportunities
fine.
along the way.
There's plenty of learnings coming out of today for sure. Just before we wrap up, then, what's the next big thing for you and your business, Mike?
Well,
what do the next 1 to 3 years look like in terms of growth and learning and challenges and
Well, the next big thing is I mean, the challenge always in recruitment is that people don't really know how good you are until they engage with you. So we are quite big on client retention, and so we want to do that. The other good thing we've got is that there's actually three companies. I've only mentioned two, but we have this. We actually have a management consultancy arm as well, because the way that a lot of businesses are engaging with interim staff now, there's been a lot of tax changes in the UK recently, and so we noticed, and that this was actually behind my move as well. I noticed a lot of my clients starting to prefer to engage with interims through a management consultancy outcome based setup. So it's promoting that with a lot of our clients as well, and we've got a few exciting discussions happening as we speak. So we've got a few things happening that would be real game changers for us. So we're standing on the shoulders of potential opportunity. So
well,
everything's crossed just now. We were out doing tenders yesterday morning actually and presenting to a couple of big names. So we're keeping everything crossed for that.
good luck with those, and
Thank you.
we'll be watching this space for sure.
Indeed.
Watching closely. Uh,
Yeah. Well, in true recruiter style, we will be jumping up and down and shouting about it.
Definitely. Well, look, Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today and hearing your story. Thanks so much again for being on the show.
Great to speak to you too, Andy.
This has been the Founders Chair podcast, and I've been speaking with Mike Sturton from B Resourcing. And thanks again, Mike. Thanks again to all of our viewers and listeners. And keep an eye out for more shows coming up on our YouTube and LinkedIn soon. But once again, Mike, thanks very much.
Thanks, Andy.
Again soon.